Welcome to the Modern CPA Success Show, where we're 100% focused on helping accounting firms achieve success. If you're an accounting firm owner who wants to learn how to provide virtual CFO services, then this podcast is for you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode. I'm really excited about this one. To start off, we had one of the best pre-recording conversations we've had yet, so I'm hoping we're going to get that same dynamic in this podcast, because I think it'll be really good. Frank has a lot to share. So we are joined by Frank Cottle, who is the founder and CEO of the Alliance Virtual Offices. He has a lot of information for our listeners about what the new normal is going to look like. But before we kind of go down that path, Frank, why don't you give us a little bit of your background and a little bit about the Alliance Virtual Office Group?
Well, I think this is on video, and so it's evident that I'm not the youngest guy in the party. We've been in the flexible workspace industry, focused on virtual officing and technology, combining people, place, and technology together into a single bundled, highly flexible product since 1979. That's when we started the predecessor company. And during that period, we built buildings all over the U.S., done joint ventures with the likes of AT&T and Bell Labs, GTE, IBM. We represent the largest tenant in the country, the U.S. federal government. Every Fortune 1000 company just about we've dealt with, and we have offices today in 54 countries from 1,300 locations. So we've seen over our 40-year migration in the flexible workplace sector a lot of change, and change is good. Change is good. So we are looking forward to what we're going to see, both from a management, human resources perspective, as well as from a technology perspective.
Great. So, and we definitely found an expert in this area, it sounds like. So I'm glad to have you. And I think, just to start it off, I know from our clients and a lot of the other accounting firms we work with, a lot of companies are seeing us getting closer to the end of this pandemic. And the question we're getting is, what do we do now? Obviously, their work environment has changed over the last year, and everything has been flexible. And so a lot of the clients are coming to us saying, okay, what's the next steps? What do we do in the future? So kind of would love your insight on what you see a lot of companies doing now, and some of the tips of what the future is going to look like in terms of what these companies can be doing.
Well, first, this is one in a series of pandemics. We every 6 or 7 years, we have something that's very disruptive, whether it's a medical issue like we're having right now, which we've had, again, about every 10 years, we have one of these somewhere. This is just the first time we've paid this type of attention to it. So this is not new to business, nor is it new to life or humanity. I think that's important to recognize. Also, we go through different political and economic shifts on a regular basis. So planning for the future isn't, I got to get back to pre-pandemic. Planning for the future is exactly that. It's planning for the future. And most companies today would say that the one word that is been added to their lexicon and is repeated most often, actually the most common thing is on Zoom, and it's you're on mute.
Right.
But aside from that, the one word that every major employer, every major business or governmental entity is using right now is agility. And they started using that in 1718 as well. 17, 18, 19, they were all using the word, but they weren't taking action with it. And that's the big difference I see right now. Everybody needed a flexible workplace plan in 2019. They couldn't hire talent if they didn't have one. Okay, so everybody needed a plan. So everybody had something on the drawing board. And then this particular pandemic hit, and government for the first time exercised and made a lot of power and a lot of regulatory authority to basically force business to comply with, and all of us to comply with a lot of new regulations almost overnight. That is what is going to go away. And once government has stopped enforcing regulatory authority to the same degree, which once they get it, naturally they like it, so they'll keep playing with it in the future. But once they do that, then it will become the company's responsibility to think on their own of how they're going to change. And in order for the companies to succeed, they'll have to think of their workforce. And I use the term workforce rather than employees, because if you looked at any corporate annual report from 3 or 4 years ago, I'll use Cisco as a good example. Good growth company. 5 years ago, they would have said in their annual report, oh, we had X revenue and Y profits, and we had 300,000 employees worldwide. About 2018 and 2019, that shifted to we have a certain amount of revenues and profits, and we have a workforce of 300,000. And that workforce already 15 to 20% of them were remote working. And IDC would define remote working as working away from your primary office, we'll say, 2 or more days a week on a permanent basis. IDC estimated in late 2018 that by 2020, and this is all pre-pandemic, of course, their estimation, we would have 1.8 billion remote workers worldwide already. So the shifts that we're seeing really were already in play. It's just instead of a plan on the drawing board, the CEOs of these companies got kicked in the rear and went right through the door and said, okay, we're doing this and we're doing this tomorrow. Your comment about giving back, a business, the world doesn't move backwards. If you've ever stood in a river, have you ever seen the water move backwards? No. Things flow in a certain direction. They only flow forward. And you better figure out how to navigate that water, how to deal with that flow, which we know it does ebb from time to time, and it also floods from time to time. And that's really what your challenges are going to be. That's the fun of business. That's the fun of life. Really is to figure out what's next and to be prepared for it on the one hand, to take advantage of it without being exploitive on the other, and to share your knowledge with others. That's human progress, we hope.
Yeah, I think the concept there is, like you said, remote, and having this hybrid model where people are wanting to work at home 2 days a week or work away from the office 2 days a week. Whereas we were always trying to make a distinction with our team, though, we're distributed, meaning you never go to the office. There is no office, and you see a lot of these corporate giants. I know like IBM, they talked about how they have 70 million square feet of office space. And the CEO was talking about how they couldn't really ever envision a model where people were distributed. You need the people part of it. And so they're expecting to do kind of like what you're talking about, this hybrid model. One thing that we found to be a little bit of a challenge, and I'd like to hear kind of your thoughts on this, was I was never effective. I was anti-work from home. I was anti-work from home because my experience was working on my kitchen table, moving it every night, trying to, it was just miserable for me. I had great internet, but the setup sucked. Once I was forced to start working at home because we were doing office remodel, I was able to nest is kind of what I say, and what I kind of call, where I have my space, I have all my monitors. Then I hated going into the office because my setup at home was better than the office. And that allowed me to switch. So in this hybrid world, I mean, obviously, maybe it'll allow like bigger companies to rent a floor instead of the whole building. So that'll save them money, if people aren't truly nesting. But I wonder, from your perspective, and I know you live in this environment where people can rent space. How does that work for being effective? And maybe it's just me wanting to spread out and be messy, but how does that work? That concept of nesting when people are doing that.
There are two failure points with your working for your kitchen table. One, it wasn't efficient for you, and second, in all likelihood, the quality of your wife's cooking or your home cooking went down. So I think that households aren't necessarily pre-designed, the majority of them, as workplaces. And people, if they're lucky, have a spare bedroom that they've converted into an office overall. Very few people have the luxury of having an office or a library pre-built into their home. Particularly as you go up and down the food chain. You mentioned IBM. Well, IBM has a whole variety of workers, many of which are based in cube farms and aren't paid at the top of the tech executive scale. They have small apartments, possibly, or very, very small homes that just don't have the space for working from home. So they haven't been able to nest yet. They've still been stuck, at the kitchen table, so to speak, and that's not going to last. One of the things I'd like you to think about when we talk about agility, and we've been thinking this way for the last 5 or 6 years, is that there are no space occupiers anymore. Everybody is a traveler. Okay? And even use your pre-pandemic experience and say, well, sometimes you work from home. Sometimes you work from a Starbucks. Sometimes you worked, on the road from a hotel. Sometimes you worked in your office. Okay, everybody since the advent of the common use of the laptop has become a traveler. Certainly in the management, sales management, marketing, executive levels, et cetera, overall. And the technology we use today allows everyone. I know we moved 3 call centers remotely in early February. And that's about as cube as you can be oriented overall. And we had no problems. We actually sent a representative of the company out to each person's home to set them up. We didn't say, here's a computer, good luck, I hope you've got good Wi-Fi. We went out and said, okay, this is what you need. Okay, this is what you got. Okay, we'll get you one of these, we'll get you one of those. We actually did a installation at everybody's home suitable for them. And what we have found is that about half the people do not want to come back. They say, no, this is working so well, I'm just a happy camper. The other half of the people are really the people that maybe they're a little bit more gregarious, maybe their job requires a little more personal interaction. They want to come back, but not full time. And we're seeing this all over. We interface with a wide variety of governments, at Fortune 1000 companies, right down to solopreneurs. So we have a big bandwidth of input on this issue, and it's really going to come down to a very simple thing. A company, unless they have a suitable, flexible work plan, and unless they have an agile attitude with all positions, will not be able to hire in the future. It's that simple. Nobody will work for them.
So for the people that are not that don't necessarily want to do it at home. I mean, that's obviously been your virtual office, concept where I can just rent a space, because we even have team members that, their spouse is staying at home with kids. And, even if they have a home office, it doesn't matter if a child's sitting outside your door, just kind of like banging on the door all day long. You know what I mean? So they kind of need to have like a healthy break too. And so they'll rent space at different places. But from my experience, at least anyways, they've been really, in the cities, there's a lot of that, because like you said, there's a lot of apartments, people don't have the space. So it was really born out of necessity. But now as we're starting to see people possibly move away from cities a little bit, what are really the options for, or what do you see kind of future business model for you moving forward as these folks start to spread out? And again, maybe they have the space at home now, so it's not the same thing as a small apartment, but they don't want to work from home. Like, what options do they have?
Yeah, and that's pretty common. I think the hybrid model that is developing now, and we see it in large companies and government, is the work from home a couple days a week, work near home, wherever that happens to be, a couple days a week, but in a professional work environment, and then come into the office when it's necessary. And as I was mentioning when we were speaking earlier, the role of the office is going to be repurposed. It's going to be a place for meeting, a place for learning, a place for certain levels of decision making, but it's not going to necessarily be a place for production working anymore. And technology allows us to work from home on certain types of projects and days. Maybe when those kids aren't banging on the doors. But the work near home structure with business and co-working centers that we've seen a tremendous emergence of over the last 4 or 5 years. They've always been popular, but we've just seen an explosion in that market, is going to be really where that migration goes. And we've been seeing it before, primarily in the more crowded central business district markets, as you mentioned, but now we're seeing it in every suburban village in the world. There's now a local place to work that's convenient, and these places are available by the hour, by the day, by the week, by the month, and they've got great communities. You go to the office to see your friends. Well, you can go to the co-working facility and see your friends too. They might work for a different company. They might be a different profession. Hey, isn't that growth? Isn't that good for you? To meet new people doing new things and stuff overall. That's very, very beneficial. So it's really an expansive move that's going on right now, not a retraction into, the kitchen table.
So you see it popping up in like little commercial spaces, because commercial real estate, some of that retail is going away anyway.
We're seeing converted train stations, churches, bank buildings, all sorts of projects that are going on right now. I just looked at a project in Atlanta earlier this morning, kind of saying that Nassau goes to co-working because they have big, complete video walls for presentations and stuff, things that most corporates don't even have. And you can use guest passes. There's a nice company, several nice companies that we know that have just a guest pass. You buy a pass the same way you might buy an airline lounge card. And this says, I have 50 hours a day, week, month, whatever, within this city at these 50 locations, if I want, or within this network of facilities on a global basis, so that when you travel, you also have officing available to you very conveniently. Because, think of the airline lounge thing for a second. Why do people get on planes in the first place? It's to go meet with others. So when they get somewhere, they actually need that lounge outside of the airport much more than they need the airport lounge. So
Right.
all of it is coming. And again, everybody is a traveler now.
Yeah, I think you talked about like expanding your network a little bit. And I think that's the one thing that advice I give when I interview for our work from home or our distributed model is that you will see your network expanded. Because I know when I worked in big business, like that was my network, was the people I worked with. Like my coworkers, the people I hung out with. And, when we worked late, we had dinner together, and that was the people I hung out with. I really didn't have much of a network outside of that. And now that I work from home, my network is really expanded. There's things I volunteer with. I play basketball with a group of guys. There's things that I have time for now that I don't have the commute, and that I've intentionally said, I'm going to go crazy if I sit in this office all day, every day, and don't see people. That's not the lifestyle I want. So I've intentionally went out there and found, okay, I'm going to do these things in the morning with people outside of that work network. And so I think that's one thing that has really helped. And that's always advice I give when I interview is like, if you find yourself spending every hour of the day in your office, you're going to go a little crazy. So.
No, you really do. It's good for everybody to get out and about a little bit. That's something that we just want to see more and more of, and most companies do too. You can be inside of a single environment and get pretty stale. Mm-hmm. So the way you interact in a business or a co-working center is actually a growth structure for most people individually, and it's very, very productive work environment as well.
You talked about a little bit, but I think the important thing you said here, and I think this is really important to our listeners, is as they're advising their clients who are thinking about going down the road, you kind of said it's important to understand your workforce. Can you go into that a little bit more and kind of talk about how you would, again, obviously people know their employees, but we're not just talking about their employees, we're talking about the people they're trying to hire, how you would go about doing that evaluation and figuring what is the best model for you?
Well, I think first, I'll use our little company as an illustration. When someone comes to work for us, we tell them right up in the first interview, the one thing that we will fire them for, absolutely positively, no question about it, is if they are unable to make their own decisions. So we don't want a workforce that has to go running down the hall to get permission to get a requisition. We want people to think. And I believe that this change of independence and agility is going to spawn an entirely new management structure that is focused on individual decision making in order to get jobs done, as opposed to the old model of a manager looking over your shoulder and in the cube farm. That is done. That is just done. So I want us to really think about decision making and how management does it, how we force our employees to do it. And that's a huge part of what we should be looking at as we build a workforce in the future overall.
No, yeah, I think that's a great point, and I really appreciate the way you answered that, because I think that is key, and I love the way you approach that interview up front and say, this is the one thing, and I think that's probably very helpful for you. So we have about 5 minutes left, so I want to make sure we get some final thoughts from both of you guys here. So definitely appreciate all your time on this show, but I would love for you to kind of give any final thoughts you have, Frank, and then I'll throw it over to you, Adam, as well.
Well, Adam, I'm going to put it over to you, Adam. Ask me a hard question. I'm not going to volunteer anything.
Well, I don't think there is a hard question you can't answer. I mean, you've got a lot of experience in the virtual space. Like I said, what I'm most curious about is when folks do go back, like I said, how do you solve for the people that are in more of the rural areas? That's the big thing, is because even for us, we have a tendency whenever people work from home, it's like, oh yeah, I got great internet and I have this and I have that. And what they mean is they can surf the web. They can't really do work. You know what I mean? It's like their internet's not that strong, or their kids gaming on an Xbox somewhere, and it's like it kills their bandwidth. So I mean, we have that problem. And then the other problem is kind of like from a security standpoint, like what are you doing and what are these virtual office spaces? So kind of two things, like one, how do you service the rural community? And you said that you think those are just going to pop up with, like, instead of gigantic, huge buildings, maybe just pop-up shops.
Oh yeah. Yeah, they already have. They already are.
So those are, so maybe that question's already answered, but then, like, from a security standpoint, because for us working from home, and I know working for a lot of large corporations like an IBM, my wife was never allowed to even remotely work from home because they had they had their intranet and they had all this other stuff. So how are spaces like yours solving the internet security problem?
That's a good question, and the fact that governments use spaces like ours, and every tech company in the world uses spaces like ours, immediately says we've probably figured that out. So the co-working business center and virtual officing world, a facility, and this is something you always have to validate with each facility because there's good, bad, and ugly of everything. But a properly designed and structured facility should have a highly managed network services system built into it with all of the appropriate firewalls and all of the bandwidth necessary to service everyone within the building. And again, I'm sitting in my home office right now, and heck, I've got a full gig of fiber in my office, and I'm the only one here.
Right.
So I'm kind of a freak for bandwidth. And bandwidth is pretty cheap. It's much cheaper, by the way, at the residential level than at the business level. I can get a gig of fiber in here for, I don't know what we pay, but it's not expensive. But if I want a gig of fiber into an office building, it's going to cost me like $1,000 a month. Okay, so getting bandwidth into a variety of different structures has a whole bunch of different costs. So a company may decide it's better to build a well-managed network on a remote basis and pump the fiber or pump the bandwidth into people's residences than have them even be in the main office in the future. But all business centers, co-working centers, et cetera, anybody that has any operating experience with that, they all have fully managed network systems built within them. Same with access. I mean, you talk about security, there's a lot of types of security. One is just access. So the very sophisticated access systems in and out from sort of a members only process there. Same with even accessing conference and meeting rooms and stuff. That's all a privileged access structure that most facilities have, and there are very sophisticated systems that manage all of that in public environments these days.
Is there something specific that I should ask the co-working space, especially whenever they get into those small pop-up shops?
I think if you have a specific security issue, let's assume you're a primary contractor to the Department of Defense for the U.S. federal government. Well, you have real specific rules on what you can and can't do. And you're going to need to know that center can put in a dedicated firewall or a dedicated access point for you specifically. And again, most of these things are in common systems with good firewalls and good structures. But you can always have a dedicated structure as well in almost all of them. And that is very common now because of the special requirements. Again, access points and security, building security, all these things are important to everyone these days. And that's better. If you look at anything, you say, well, why are restaurants popular? Well, they can aggregate food services and cooking services and provide a better meal. Okay, why do we aggregate technology? Same thing. So in a good center, remember I said initially, we combine people, place, and technology. into a single bundled service agreement that's highly flexible. So if you have those three things, and the people I'm talking about are service, clerical, secretarial, administrative support, receptionists, et cetera, all of the operating infrastructure people you need with a good place that's well located and well managed and has the technology to support your business, you can do anything.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, definitely.
Particularly if it's flexible. Say, hey, I only need one today. I don't need 10. So why should I pay for 10, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day? And that's a big thing from an accounting point of view. I'll end up, now we're going to run short, but let's assume, Adam, that you and I are each technologists. We each want to form a small company, and we're going to Jamie, who's a venture capitalist. Okay. And we each have a cool product and a cool business plan. And I go to Jamie and I say, I need $1 million. Jamie says to me, he says, what are you going to do with that? And it's very simple. I'm going to hire a receptionist. I'm going to buy some furniture to start up. And so I've got to buy some furniture, put in a bandwidth management system, think of like a ping pong table, blah, blah, blah. And when I'm done with all that, I'm going to hire some engineers. And we're going to build this amazing new product. So I exit my interview and you would go into your interview, Adam. And Jamie asked the same question. And in doing so, you say, I'm going to move into a flexible workplace center and hire engineers. Who's going to get the money? Who has the better business model? Well, why are you moving into a flexible workplace center? Well, because I don't want any long-term leases because I don't know how quickly I'm going to expand. So I don't want to tie myself up with a long-term lease. That's an accounting issue for you because I don't want that debt of the long-term lease on my balance sheet because I don't want to restrict my capacity to borrow. All of these problems in business, not just as a place to work, but economic problems in business are also solved by the virtual officing structure.
No, it makes sense.
That was a great final question and an even better answer. So I really appreciate the details you went into, and I think that is very helpful for our listeners. So just real quick, we want to have more great guests like Frank on the show. So if you're interested in being a guest or if you have questions, you can always email us at cpa@summitcpa.net. Again, cpa@summitcpa.net. So we'd love to hear from you. Frank, how can our listeners get hold of you? How can they access your business? Would love to make sure they know where to find you.
No, thank you. That's easy. Anybody that's interested in virtual officing can go to alliancevirtualoffices.com. And anybody that's just interested in what's going on in the future of work and the workplace and all that can go to allwork.space. Allwork.space. We reach over 8 million people a month with Allwork. So it's a real good publication. It's free. There's no pay gates or anything. So it's just free for everybody. And we produce that to promote the future of work and all of the myriad of ways that people are looking into that future.
Awesome. Well, again, great guest. Appreciate you coming on. And Adam, thanks for joining us as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Frank.
My pleasure.
Enjoy this episode? Visit our website at summitcpa.net to get more tips and strategies for achieving modern CPA firm success. We're here to be a resource in this ever-changing industry.